There we go. Sweet. Hi, everybody. So my name is Terry Rogaway, and I am the Educational Programs Coordinator for the Santa Clara Valley Open Space Authority. And as you can tell, I'm very enthusiastic. Don't be scared. I'm always like this, especially if I have coffee. So today we would like to welcome you and let everybody know that the program today is all about gardening. And I'm glad I'm not scaring you, Julie. So, so today the program is going to be all about gardening, and this is basically what I wanted to tell you is that this is actually new for me. So in the past, I used to be only successful with poppies, the one plant I couldn't kill, and that's why I used to call my friend Denise all the time. Be like, "Hey, someday you could come be a gardener at my house and help me not kill my plants." But short attention span. So let's see. What I would like to do is share my screen. If you have any questions, please go ahead and type them in the chat, and Kat will be stalking you. So I don't know if you managed to pin yourself, Kat, but can you guys see the screen? Everything's okay? Okay, good. So I'm going to minimize the little picture with you guys in the sides because I'm like, hee hee, oh, look, so-and-so's here. I'm like, no, I'm doing a program. Okay, here we go. So let's go gardening. This is a beautiful view of the Santa Clara Valley. And so basically what I love to do at Open Space and what my job is I actually come up with the ideas for the programs and help decide like what direction the programs are going to go. And that's where I would like to tell you that the reason I'm doing this program today is because I'm fascinated by this idea of gardening and being able to grow stuff. And this was the first year. I just turned 48, and this is the first year that I successfully grew stuff in the garden. So I'm totally excited about that. And gardening is actually part of our mission. So, well, agriculture. I'm going to say this is domestic agriculture. So agriculture is actually part of our mission. So for the Open Space Authority, what we do is we really conserve the natural environment. We support agriculture, yay, including historical forms of agriculture. So if you've been to like Prush Farm Park and Guadalupe River Park with their heritage gardens and things like that, we love that kind of stuff. So we are always looking to support things like that. And also there's like a heritage historical area in Milpitas called the Alviso Adobe, and they have old historical, orchard trees there too. So we have stuff like that. So you can go see those, and that's part of what we are preserving because agriculture is growing plants and it's also protecting land that animals can walk across. And any plant that you put in the ground is going to help us because it creates oxygen and helps to filter out pollution. And I'm just so excited. But most of all, I'm excited because I'm a foodie and I love to eat stuff. And I love this concept of growing things in your yard or on your balcony or in your apartment and being able to eat it. That's so cool. So this story begins with a zombie garden. Oh, don't be scared. So actually it began with a dead potato. So what happened was, as typical of me, I get very excited and I get distracted easily, and I have all of these plants that I'm trying to cook, and I'm thinking, oh, I'm going to try these new recipes and things, and a lot of times I forget. So, we often play this game at my house called What is that smell? And then we have to find the critter that used to be a potato that is now living in the cupboard, turning into a rock. So basically, I found this potato, and this one is not as bad as the one I found. This is the one I found today. So I have these potatoes that just kind of got all wrinkly and scary and started to grow stuff. And I was like, oh no, I know, I'll put it in the ground. So that's what I did. And people were sending around these little videos like on Facebook, and it was life hacks, like how to like do things. And I thought I saw this thing where people were putting their produce ends. So like when you cut the end off of the onion, the part that you don't eat that has the little tentacles is like the roots. when they had that, they were putting that in water, and it was growing roots, and then they were putting it in the ground, and I saw them do that with a potato. So I thought, what if I try that? I'll try that. I'll put this potato in the ground and see what happens. So my friends and family know that I'm often put things in the ground. So like when I'm out walking around, I'll pick stuff up and I just plant it in the garden at random, and then I totally forget it was there. And then it pops up and I'm like, what's that? So that part is not new for me, but actually paying attention to where I put the potato and seeing what happens to it as a result and being excited about that, that was totally new. So I put it in the ground and I covered it up, and I was actually worried about the potato because, I didn't understand it's a tuber. It's supposed to be under the soil. It's okay if it's not peeking out, but a lot of times I think of things in the same way that kids do. And I was like, what if the potatoes got no light? It'll be okay. It'll be okay. So I still covered it up. And lo and behold, I got potatoes. So it actually did start to grow, and it was really exciting. And I had to put this stake in the ground to like try to hold the plant up. And so I started with this potato, and today I went out and I wanted to show you there's other potatoes that showed up. So none of these are the original potato. And it's so wonderful to know that you can do that you can take your produce from your kitchen, and enthusiastic children and people who have large inner child like me, and go out into the garden and put it in the ground and cover it up. It'll be okay, and it'll grow a new plant. So I actually have all of these potatoes growing in my yard, and you can see these little green thingies. This is actually the old-fashioned netting stuff that they put underneath way back when I used to have grass out here. So we did pull up all the grass and start to put in native things, and like, yay. And I have to say that Rebecca Schoenberger from California Nativescapes is here today, and keeping an eye on me for this. And she's actually the person that inspired me, because I went to college with her, and she was just made her life's purpose, dealing with native plants and things. And I just was so inspired that I was like, I'm gonna get rid of this. And I had to do it in little pieces, little chunks, but I did end up getting rid of my grass. And I have one little tiny chunk of grass that's for cats. But so that's what that netting was for originally, was to help the grass stay. So the weird thing is that the potatoes are growing up underneath it. So I keep going up there and having to cut this netting loose in order to get these potatoes. And I was just so tickled. So I picked this one up and I was like, what's that? Oh no, it's been defiled by wildlife. So in the plant world, we call that fertilizer. That's okay. Fertilizer's good. But I was like, look at these little roots that are kind of coming out of here. And look at this, he grew a little protrusion. So it's fascinating to me that this, this entire potato here came from another plant that I created, that I planted. I created this situation by sticking that in the ground. And so you can do that too. But one of the things that Rebecca was telling me or teaching me about was that you could put the potato in the ground, and when it starts to grow, you cover it up with even more soil. And I was like, oh no, won't that smother it? But it makes it grow even more potatoes. And then every time you see them, you just cover it up again. And so you need a container that's kind of tall if you're going to do that. And then that makes it easier for you to get to the potatoes when you want to eat them. And I like the fact that they're in the ground, and it's not really going to go bad, because it's not like it's going to go bad in my cupboard, but they're actually in the ground. So that's quite exciting.
Hey, Terry.
Yeah.
Somebody had a question about all of that.
Back to my potato.
Lisa asked, I put some red onion roots that I planted in the ground, and they're like green onions. Can you eat the greens, or can you actually eat the onion underground too?
I would recommend eating the onion. I actually did do that with a yellow onion. It's very exciting because it grows up from the middle. Like, where you slice the onion and then it's kind of like flat, right? And so the weird thing is that the plant actually grows up from the very center, and then it becomes a whole nother onion. So just because of my lack, I have lots of enthusiasm, but not a whole lot of expertise. And because of that, I would not want to recommend that you eat the green part. A lot of plants you can, especially gardening plants, you can eat the green part. But until we find out for sure, Probably don't do that. Eat the part that you recognize. If there's any gardeners, so if Denise or Rebecca's on here and you guys want to pitch in, is that okay to eat the green part of the onion? Because I know sometimes people put, I want to say people put stuff like that in salads, but I'm not sure. Suspense.
Well,
Oh,
there's green onions, like scallion green onions, and then and that's usually a different plant than like actual onions. So it might taste different.
oh, okay. But you won't like grow an extra arm, right?
No, definitely not.
I always wonder about that. Thank you, thank you. This was actually a zombie tomato. So I did, tomatoes are pretty disgusting when they go bad. And of course that happened to me too. Got a little soupy. And so I went outside and I put the tomato in the ground and I ended up with these tomatoes that came up and they actually tasted so much better than I have when I get like ones that are not, if I buy ones that are not organic, like at the grocery store. I'd never realized that they're not very tasty. But these actually ended up being really tasty, and these were grown from a organic tomato that I did get like from Whole Foods. And so, well, I didn't eat the original, which is why it got squishy, but I benefited because I ended up with a whole bunch more of these like out in the yard. And one of the things I wanted to ask about, like Rebecca or Denise, is that one of the things that happened was I thought the tomato was done, like after I got all the tomatoes and stuff, and it kind of fell over. So I'm like, that's okay because the plant's gonna die, and then I can like put it in my compost pile or whatever. Well, then what happened was more tomatoes showed up. So is it okay? Like, what do tomatoes do in a natural state? Do they just can they lay down on the ground like that and still produce tomatoes, or is that like not a good idea?
I would say for me, it's a good idea. And sometimes you have the seeds that will be in the ground for that season that you pulled your tomato plant up. And then what do you know? Next season you'll have more tomatoes. In fact, I had a bird that I have no idea when this happened, but in the far back of my backyard, all of a sudden I had Romo tomatoes growing up, the long, small ones. And I'm like, I didn't plant a Romo tree back there, and that was right underneath my orange tree. And so that season, I just let it grow, put a cage around it, and I had Romo tomatoes. And then we just let it die out. And I still, to this day, that far corner will pop up with reseeding of the tomato plant.
Oh, cool. So you got help. You could get help by wildlife.
That was an
That's
unexpected.
awesome.
Yeah, because usually I plant cherry tomatoes. So
Oh,
this was the first time that I got Romo tomatoes. And then, like I said, usually the cherry tomatoes will fall, get in the soil, and I won't know when I take the plant out. And in the following season, I'll have more cherry tomatoes that will pop up. If I don't cultivate the soil, if I just let it be, then the following season I'll get another tomato plant up.
oh, cool. Okay. So
And
yeah, I went out this morning and was like, wow, there's the tomato plant is still going. It had a little period where it got a little funky looking, but it's still going, and now it seems like it's coming back.
And Terry, I think it's kind of dependent on the weather. We've had a really mild winter with very little rain and very few cold days. So normally the weather would knock out tomatoes early at the end of the fall winter or end of fall, beginning of winter season. But with the mild weather that we're having, it's possible they could just kind of keep going.
Ooh, so lucky. We're so lucky to live here.
Yeah, so lucky to have a drought.
I won't be saying that in the middle of like August, huh?
Exactly.
That's okay though. I could pretend. I could pretend.
Somebody pointed out in the comments, though, Rachel said one of the reasons to lift the tomato up is because with the fruits laying on the ground, they're more likely to pests, insects, or animals are going to be able to get to the tomatoes. So if you want to preserve more tomatoes for yourself, you'd be better off to probably cage them somehow to lift them up off the ground. And that's also going to help, she also mentioned, have good airflow, because some of the other pest issues, disease issues you get with tomato can be caused by the environment that it creates around itself.
Oh, okay. So we'll help it out by making the air circulate better by lifting it up. Okay.
Yes, and then you're going to get less powdery mildew and less hidey hole places for little critters to hide and raise their babies on your tomato.
I just had this vision of gnomes. Like, can it please be Cabbage Patch? Please be Cabbage Patch.
We have a lot of questions coming in from the chat all about that. For example, should I cut back my cherry tomato now or let it remain in the cage? Because it's already produced for 2 years.
Wow.
Wow.
So, I mean, if it's still producing, I'd say let it keep producing.
How do you feel about that, Rebecca?
I'd say, yeah, what Kat said, you just kind of got to evaluate, is it mostly producing, or is it mostly dried up and kind of on its way out? I personally would probably yank all tomatoes by this time of year, but I personally don't like eating tomatoes, so I'm probably not the best advocate for that.
Awesome. Were there other questions?
And then another question about tomatoes in particular is, do tomatoes come back from being dormant? The ones that I planted this year look dead to me.
Oh.
No, tomatoes are usually considered annual. Very rarely will they continue to last. It is possible because we have such a mild climate, but usually they don't. And the other thing with tomatoes seeding, like what Denise was saying, is you may get a surprise and not the tomato that you expected and not the tomato that it was last year, because tomatoes are constantly, they all cross hybridize, and that's how we get new tomato varieties. So if you want like a Roma tomato or a beefsteak tomato, then you're not necessarily going to get the exact same thing if it comes up from seed.
Mm-hmm.
Whoa, far out.
Very cool. All right, I'm gonna let Terry move on.
So one side note that I did learn about this year is, you hear about a lot of people having food allergies and things like that. So one of the things that I did learn about is that tomatoes and potatoes have something in them called lectin. And with tomatoes, it's in the outer peel and in the seed parts. So if you think that if you notice that you eat tomatoes and then like your stomach hurts or you have other digestive issues, or if you eat potatoes that like still have the peel on and the same kind of thing kind of happens to you, you might want to try talk to your doctor and try looking into the possibility of getting some supplements that are lectin blockers, because that will allow you to still be able to eat them, but not have the discomfort. The other thing that you can do is just take the peel off the tomato and push out the little seeds, and you can eat the fruit part and be fine. Cool. Okay, so what we have here is, I did the same thing with celery. So we have celery over here, and then I got really excited because I found I did find a seed packet that had collard greens in it, and I'm like, I don't know what those are, but I think I remember that from my Southern cooking book that I tried to read. So I was learning about these plants. That the thing is, I don't like kale. It's just my personal preference, not that of the Open Space Authority, but I don't like to try to eat kale. It's way too chewy and it's a lot of effort, and it kind of hurts my stomach a little bit. So I was looking for other alternatives. And so what I found out was that you can grow collard greens, and there's ways to prepare them. And it's actually it's known to be a little bit more nutritious than kale. So if you want an alternative, that's an alternative. But I did have to promise my husband I was only going to try it on him once. He was like, ew, because he doesn't eat that many green things. But so what I discovered with the celery was I took the end of the celery and I put it in some water and let it start to grow roots. And then I loosened up some soil in the yard and I put it in the ground. And then it did the same thing where it grew up from the middle. And it was actually kind of like celery on steroids. So when it grew, I was like, wow, it's almost like you have to make sure that you water it a lot because it was kind of really chewy and not the same as like when you get the ones in the store, it had a lot more flavor, like a stronger celery flavor, but it was also a lot more fibrous. So if you get to the point where you're going to harvest it and take a couple stalks and do like the peanut butter routine, you know, just make sure that you water it really good for a few days so that it's a little bit more flexible. Ooh. So these were the collard greens right here. And I couldn't believe it. I mean, this was like a foot by almost 2 feet, like just one leaf. So what you do is you cut the leaf off and then you take this big vein out. And then what you do is you wash it real good and you put whatever your favorite thing. So it could be an excuse to eat butter, or you could do cream cheese, or you could do olive oil with different seasonings in it, and you spread it all over the leaf and you roll it up like a burrito. And then you slice it. So when you slice it, you can actually fry it up in the pan on the stove, but just be aware that it's kind of like mushrooms. Like there's this giant, you could have a giant bucket of mushrooms, right? And then when you cook it on the stove, you end up with like a teacup. So if you're going to do it, you need to have like 7 or 8 like of these ginormous leaves, and then it'll cook down. But interestingly enough, it turns really bright green, really beautiful green. So it's very nutritious and very satisfying, like to eat that. I was like, whoa. Here's my beautiful, well, these are not my poppies, but this is just a reminder that poppies up until now is the only thing I could grow. So one of the things I also noticed about was that we have these really old rose bushes in the yard. And I asked my husband, I'm like, hey, when did you move into this house? And he said 1971. And I was like, whoa. And then I said, so were the rose bushes already there when you got here? And he said, yes, they were. And they were already like mature. So that is 50 years ago. So this rosebush plant is like over 50 years old, and it's been here like the whole time. There's actually 2 of them. And the amazing thing is that they smell wonderful, and they've had several years of not really knowing how to be pruned because I don't really know how to do that. And so I decided this year I was going to learn. So one of the things that I learned is that when you have brand new rose bushes and you put them in the ground, you want to prune them like this time of year because it'll help them have more blossoms and stuff in the spring. But if you have really old rose bushes like this, where they're just been growing for a long time, you don't prune them now. You prune them after they bloom. So the older the rose bush is, the more likely it'll be growing the flower from like more of the woody part, is my understanding, than the new ones, which are like going to grow from the greener, newer, younger parts. So I was kind of curious about that. Oh, but I was going to tell you, like this part right here, the rose hip. So that's a great source of vitamin C. So you can get rose hip tea and things like that. But if there's ever a zombie apocalypse and you can't, get a hold of vitamin C and things like that, and if you don't have citrus, then you can actually, this is the part of the rose after the petals fall off and the flower's done. You can actually make a tea by soaking these and drink that and get a lot of vitamin C that way.
Hey, Terry, someone asked about your roses and what feed you use to fertilize.
So what I've been doing right now is like homemade compost. So that's all that I've been doing. But I'm working on it this year, and I want to try to put, like, I was looking into like, okay, so really I'm going to ask Denise. I was going to ask Denise if bone meal is actually okay to put in there. Up until now, I've just been growing my own compost, like with yard litter and leaf litter, and then I put like my eggshells out there and stuff like that. But Denise, what kind of stuff should I put on there if I want this to finally like go berserk and be really big?
I have 2 rose bushes at the Heritage Rose Garden. And then I have my own rose bush at my house. And I do the same thing. I put a cup of bone meal, mix it in with the soil, and then extra water. And then for me too, I just kind of check on my rose bush once a week and see how the leaves are doing, see if there's any discoloration. And usually a couple weeks after I do the bone meal, I mix it in with the soil. And you can, like you said, compost is good. I'm putting mulch over or around the area to keep the moisture in for the rose. I've seen to been successful with that. All that is really important to give the rose attention and to check it.
Okay, cool. So I found this little guide online for like how to prune your rose bushes. And the first thing I want to tell you is make sure you have gloves. So I like to go in there. I like to be able to feel things. And I found out that, you know, the rose bushes fight back. So it is better to be patient with yourself and have gloves and make sure that your pruners are clean and nice and sharp. And then you can go in and you can start to trim. But the main idea is to open it up so that any branches that are touching other branches, you're going to want to remove those so that they're not rubbing against each other. And if you want it to grow outward, you can actually get rid of the branches that are doing that, so that are not doing that. So see how this one on number 2 is like growing towards the inner part of the bush? You would remove that so that it will open up that space and allow for new growth. And then the other thing is you'll find a lot of these dead branches and stuff. So you want to remove those as you see them too. And then I think, let's see. This is what I was going to ask you about, Janice, because like they talk about trimming them, right? And they say, oh, this is too high if it's that. So this little bud here is a little brand new piece of growth. And you want to trim this so that these are actually heading outward from the plant, not towards the middle of the plant. But they seem like really strict about it. Like how did they get like this really intense slant right here? So like this is hurtful to it because did they mess this part up?
I'm looking at it, and it's usually new growth happens when you have the split, and that's where you trim it if that's what you're asking me.
Yeah.
Like I said, that's why it's always good to look at your rose bush, because then you can see if there's new growth, and then the dead part you would cut off right before it starts to branch out a new limb, as I call it, a new limb.
So it looks like you want to be a little bit over the top of the thing. So make sure you don't cut it so it goes below where this new growth is right here.
Right.
Stay above it, but get close to it, but stay above it.
And then I know, FYI, they will be doing classes at the Heritage Rose Garden pretty soon with their volunteers. That they do classes for people to learn more about their rose bush as well.
Excellent. So that would be really good for us to call them and find out, because I know that they have huge volunteer events where they need people to come help trim these heritage roses. And so they'll actually teach you, and then they set you up and you get to practice. And I mean, some of those plants in that garden are just absolutely amazing. And they go back, like their lineage goes back hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years.
Everyone, there we go.
Hey, Terry.
Yeah.
Somebody wanted to see the 5-step page back.
There we go. So they're calling them canes, like the branches here that are coming up. So they want you to make sure that you remove the canes that are growing towards the center. And you want like a vase shape.
I also wanted to mention Rachel in the chat. She says, even if you make mistakes pruning roses, it's awfully hard to kill them outright. Just wait for the bush to recover and you'll have a chance to try again.
Yay! Thank you. That makes me happy. I was pretty scared because it's like this bush has been around. It's like older than I am. And I was like, oh. I don't want to be responsible for hurting it. So they'll trim like this, and then when they're done, what they do is they go across and they cut them about it says like 2/3, of the way up like that in order to like start, you know, allow for the new growth. Because like when you see rose bushes and they're like really trimmed, and I'm like, how come it didn't die? But it's, a lot of times plants do a lot better after they've been, you know, cut back. It encourages them to grow new, you know, younger, more productive, you know, parts of their own selves. Everybody okay with this part? I could go on to the next one. So an advice is watch the water. So we're going into a drought right now, and I have noticed that the soil in my own backyard is pretty weird in that it's a lot of clay. So like it'll rain and it gives the appearance of still being wet, but when I go out and touch it, it's actually not. So I just go out and give a light water maybe twice a week right now, because we are hopefully still going to get a little bit of rain. But I try to do that, and then under the trees and things, I have some mulch in order to help try to keep the moisture in and things like that. But they were warning against, don't have too much water because you can cause lots of other things to happen, like mold and things like that that will be harmful to your plants. But don't forget that just because it's winter doesn't mean that you don't need to go out and make sure that it's not too dry. So if you're trying to start plants, they can actually dry out, and that would be really sad. I actually have an orange tree in my backyard that's also still been there since before 1971. And so one of the things that I noticed is that since I put the mulch under there and my compost pile under there, it's actually got really beautiful green leaves now. And winter's the time when citrus does really start to come in and have these beautiful fruit that you can eat. And then I was just cracking up because it's like, blood. Because when I looked up, what do you do to like fertilize your citrus, right? And it said blood meal. And I'm like, what? What is blood meal? It's exactly what you think it is. It's very gruesome in that sense. So in places where they have slaughterhouses and things like that, what they'll do is they will actually keep the blood from those, and then they dry it into a powder form and they sell it to these places that make this fertilizer. So this is actually dried blood. So that also made me realize that historically, you know, if an animal dies under a tree and stuff like that, like the blood actually does help fertilize that soil, and it's very rich in nitrogen. So this is the time of year to put nitrogen in the ground around your fruit trees, your citrus trees. And so you can actually order blood meal and go get some of that, and it's really concentrated. So make sure you read the directions on the package and don't put too much, because if you put too much, you can actually stop the tree from growing fruit, or worst case scenario, you can actually burn it. So make the soil, you know, hurtful in that sense. So you want to be careful of that. But I was like, what? They want blood. Who knew?
And I have a suggestion for the citrus trees as well, orange or lemon, during this time. Or if you're giving your lemon or orange trees water, supplemental water, just because of this dry drought, this is a time to plant or not plant, put in the ground citrus stakes. So at any garden, Home Depot, nursery, they have citrus stakes that you put in with a little hammer when the ground is moist, obviously not hot. And this is a time you put the citrus stakes in right now. And that gives your citrus plants, oranges and lemons, a boost. And I do that. And there's instructions on the box that tells you how many citrus stakes you put on the outer perimeter of your citrus plant based on how large the tree is.
Oh, so by perimeter, do you mean like the edge of the canopy part?
Correct.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah.
if you dumped water on it and it dripped, like that line, the drip line?
Right.
Just
Exactly.
checking and make sure.
That's what most people don't understand about the drip line is most people want to water at the trunk of a tree, but it's really from the trunk to where the furthest branch is where the roots are. So think of like the canopy above is mirrored by roots below.
Ooh.
So you want to water in that range, not at, I don't know why us humans want to water trunks of plants.
It's
Hey,
very
Terry,
true.
there's a couple of questions popping up in the chat. First off, someone asked, she didn't pick her oranges last year, but she has a new crop and she picked those. But are the old oranges, are they still any good?
Ooh.
I don't know. I don't think they would be.
Yeah, I would say she could take one and cut one open, but usually they are either dried up. There's not a lot of juice left.
Mm-hmm.
You know, something that did happen that I was house sitting for this lady who had these orange trees, and she warned me. She's like, go out there and check this out. So sometimes you can be looking at an orange that's really old and you think that it's still there. And when she turned it around, the whole inside was gone. So one of the things that will happen is like critters like rats will run along the fence and they're like, oh, look, oranges. And they run over there and they bite a little hole and somehow they pulled everything, including like the white stuff on the outside of the orange, like, you know, between the orange and the hole. And I was like, oh my gosh, this totally looks like this orange is still alive. It looks a little dry and the whole inside was pulled out by critters. So just be warned, you could see evidence of critters too.
And the other question is that how often do you fertilize fruit trees or citrus trees in particular?
Master.
Oop, Rebecca, did you want to talk about that?
No, sorry. I should have been on mute. Sorry.
Oh. So for myself, I do it once a year, but I do cheat and put compost around it, which I think is also nutritious throughout the time. But Denise, what do you think? How often do you fertilize your citrus?
Welcome, everyone.
Ah, sorry.
Yeah, I do mine right before winter. You know, I put the citrus stakes in every year right before winter. And then, like you said, the extra watering because of the drought, what's going on now, and then whatever compost you can. But once a year is good enough.
Oh, okay, cool. And then this is a picture of a worm I actually saw this morning. So I was like, what are you doing? And I was scared he was dead, but I touched him and he actually moved. So, and then 10 minutes later, I went out and he had gone back underneath. So one of the things that we need in the soil is it's really beneficial to have your worms. So when the soil gets wet, you know, because we have light rain or anything like that, just be careful about stepping on it because you are compacting the soil. And the worms benefit us by going through the soil and aerating it. So they make like these nice little air pockets and then they poop. So you get fertilizer, which is really good. And so they're actually very beneficial if you have them. But the danger is like if you get too much water, they could actually drown. And that's why you'll see a lot of worms come up, you know, when it rains really hard, all of a sudden worms are all up all over the place. It's because they can't breathe. So it's kind of like as soon as the water passes through the soil, they'll go right back down again and get safe again. So they did recommend, like, if it does rain and you see them, you know, go ahead and put them back on top of the soil. You know, if you want to be a worm savior, you can do that. But some people will grow worm bins and then use the castings, you know, which is a polite word for poop, from the worms to fertilize their soils too.
Terry, if you don't mind, I would like to add something about fertilizing all those times I interrupted.
It's all good. It's all good.
So every type of tree has its own needs. So citrus and avocado are usually lumped together. They're both evergreens, so they need to be fertilized more frequently. Usually 3-4 times a year. It just depends on what you want to do. I would recommend to everybody, I would assume there's people from everywhere in this talk. So I would say that you should all learn to get familiar with your local Master Gardener program. Each county has a Master Gardener program. The state has, the University of California has the ANR, Agricultural and Natural Resource Center, which the Master Gardeners are a branch of. So there's a ton of resources out there for whatever you're looking for, whether you have apricot or a cherry or blah, blah, blah. So somebody asked about should citrus be pruned when they're fertilized, and citrus is very frost tender. So you definitely don't want to prune them in the winter versus a lot of our stone fruit trees like apples, peaches, nectarines, plums. Those all do want winter pruning. The only ones you don't want to prune in winter are citrus, because that bushy growth is going to help protect it from frost. If we do have cold days, that those outer branches can take the damage, and then once danger of frost is past, you can trim that off. The other one you don't want to prune in winter is apricot and cherry, because they tend to get eutypa, which leads to gummosis, which is these ooey gooey amber things. So that said, you can just Google UC peach tree and you'll get all the information on pruning, fertilizing, watering for whatever specific fruit tree you're looking for.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. So folks, so that's Rebecca, and she's here with California Nativescapes. I don't know, put this little thing, we'll show. Woo. I'm so excited because she sent Christmas cards out and I got seeds. Yay! So California Nativescapes. So please feel free to look them up online and give her a call if you would like to make use of her services and things like that. And she's very much local. And then super duper Denise. So Denise is one of our docents, and she's also a park ranger with the city of San Jose and a sheriff's person and all of that. So, but I pick her brain a lot because of her knowledge base with plants and her gardening past and things like that. And then the other person that I wanted to introduce you to is actually Elizabeth. So I don't know, is Elizabeth in here right now?
I am.
Aha! It just so happens that Elizabeth also works at Open Space, and I was talking to her last night and I found out, of all things, she actually planted a winter garden. So would you please share that with us?
I will. Let me think. Hold on. What do I want to do? Let me open up all my pictures. So I am a garden hobbyist, like enthusiast or expert is definitely probably too strong of a phrase, but I grew up, my mother always gardened more so for beauty. I think she was always aspiring for that kind of wild, overgrown English garden thing, but she also always had a little bit of a vegetable patch somewhere that we kept going. And so I have had for a number of years now, just in my little backyard here in San Jose, a couple of raised beds that I try to keep alive and make produce for me. And I'm going to embarrassingly share some pictures of these raised beds with you all. So let me do that. And I'll just try to explain some of my logic, which starts with I'm behind on weeding. So please don't judge too hard the weeds that are hiding in here amongst all of my other things. Like I said, this was very spur of the moment. Terry hit me up last night and I said, sure, I can kind of share just for the fun, and maybe some of the more experts here can give me some advice even. I'll take some if you got some. But so this is the first year I ever did a winter garden. Normally this thing just kind of goes crazy and the birds drop all sorts of seeds and it just becomes its thing. And every spring I'm out there like pulling 2-foot tall things out of my garden. As I said, I'm not a huge weed management person. That is just not where I want to be spending my time. But this year I decided, what the heck, let's go for it. And so I planted a variety of what I Googled to be kind of winter garden things in the Bay Area here. So we've got, I believe, some collard greens, if I remember right, as Terry was mentioning. Or no, collards, turnips. We've got some turnips here, some collard greens. If you, can I zoom? Yeah. If you look right there, you can see evidence of carrots I did try for carrots. We'll see what happens with those. I have all these like surprises. This is what I'm learning about winter gardens. You just kind of put things in and there's all sorts of stuff going on underground. And I'm kind of like, okay, when do I get to really find out what's going on underground? So it's kind of this like surprise moment. And then over here, I have some kale that it was slow going, and this all took a while. And I started from seed. I put seed straight into the dirt and just kind of let it go. Like I said, this is my first attempt at a winter garden, was just kind of playing with it. And then I've got some snap peas coming over here that are making me happy just because they're climbing, and that just feels like a success, even if I never get a snap pea off of them. So that is one of the beds. The other bed looks even worse. So bear with me one sec. Where is it? Oh, close up of carrots. Sorry, with my little
Carrots.
but the other bed, I have a whole 4x8 bed, and all I've gotten out of this one, no cauliflower, no broccoli, but I did get a few beets coming through. So we'll see what those guys do for me. Play with some beets, which again, I hear can be a good winter option here in the Bay Area. And then I also bought, because I don't have a ton of sunshine in my backyard, which I think is well, this time of year. In the summertime, it's full sun, but the way my house is, my house just makes this big shade cover come wintertime with the sun lower in the sky. And so I had bought one of these vertical gardens, and I've got a few lettuce sprouts that are trying, and we'll see what they do to try to maximize what sun I do get. But these are super fun. It was kind of just a fun little thing. I'm excited to keep playing with it and see what we can do in terms of just, yeah, growing, seeing what happens. And then let me think. I have the other thing that kind of ties into my garden, but that is really important. Oh yeah, I got one of those rotating compost bins, super fun. But my main source of compost is these ladies. So I've had chickens in my backyard for, I want to say like 8 years now, I think, something like that. And I treat their run as a compost bin. I throw my leaf mulch in it when I'm raking leaves in the backyard from my trees. I like keep a bed of straw on it, so they enjoy digging through the straw anyways to look for their scratch and fun stuff. And then I get to accumulate a little bit of their nitrogen contributions to their fertilizer to my mulch, and I'll be able to utilize kind of some of this, not all of it, because it's still a little nitrogen heavy, and I'm not a soil scientist, but I know that much. But I'll use that into my beds when I'm planting in the spring. I'll kind of dig some of this out. But yeah, and they get a lot of my vegetable scraps. I put some in that bin, but they get most of them to keep them happy. And yeah, that's, I don't know, that's my little mini garden tour. And we have some citrus trees too. My orange tree, I actually took some great notes with that, because I have been suffering my oranges the last couple of years. I think it's with the drought, but they've been splitting.
Oh.
I get lots and lots of oranges, but they are all split. And then the fruit dries out. And so we did pull off, we still managed to get like maybe 20 or 30 off this year, and they had great flavor, but for the most part, they've been splitting. And so I'm trying to get better at understanding my water management. And so I appreciate some of the comments earlier about citrus. But yeah, there you go, Terry. That's my spur of the moment hobby garden-ness.
Elizabeth, we do have a couple of questions about your garden.
Sure.
First off, somebody wanted to know a little bit about your irrigation system.
So I have, at the moment, we have a leak in the irrigation system. Normally I have like, you can see my husband is very handy and ran us some pipe to run a drip kind of system. And so normally it all connects here. Oh, not that. Normally it all connects here, and there's a big loop with like drip points that come off of it. But unfortunately we've had a leak in this pipe. And so right now I'm having to just hose hand water. So I've been doing some hand watering, but even that, like I said, I'm a like planted in hope kind of gardener, and so I'm not.
I can so relate.
We haven't had that much rain, but again, like I said, it's very, very shady. I have not manually added water to this bed in like a week, and I think, but you can see how moist it still stays because really the sun line on you can see it's just a straight line of sun that comes right through there, and it won't hit these beds again probably until March. And so they really are just doing what they can with no sunshine and that kind of water. But yes, normally I would have drip, and I try to be, use my fancy timer and all of that stuff. So hopefully we'll get that repaired for the spring veggies, spring and summer stuff.
The other question that people wanted to ask is, first off, how do you reach to the back? Because that's a
it is a big bed. I do have to kind of crawl in. Like I tried to do rows so I could kind of identify like where I could maybe step. And the fence is a new addition because if I don't put this fence here, my dogs want to go nap. And so last year they killed a bunch of things before they ever came up because they would go nap on them while they were cute little babies, and then they just died. And so I put a fence in. I did have to keep my dogs out because in the spring and summer this gets a lot of sun. So it's where my dog likes to go bake, as we call it, sit in the sun and soak it up. But yeah, it could be a challenge. I can come in from the side here. The things that plant here is really the toughest spot. It's definitely a little bit of yoga, we're like playing Twister, trying to get in there.
Yeah, and somebody else also asked, what gardening zone are you in?
Oh my goodness. What are we in the Bay Area? Are we 9?
I think we are.
Yeah, I believe it's 9. I'm in San Jose, so we're very, it was 70 degrees yesterday. Very moderate, I guess. But yeah, I believe we're zone 9.
Awesome.
And I do, like I said, I do from seeds. I keep a nice seed collection. This was just my first time ever doing winter and doing it straight in the ground. So yeah.
Yay. Thank you for sharing.
Of course. Thank you, Terry, for asking me.
Thank you so much. And everybody, thank you so much for coming and joining us today. If you have any questions, please feel free to email us at trogaway, TROGOWAY at openspaceauthority.org. And you can also feel free to do, I think it's info@openspaceauthority.org, and we can put you in touch with Denise. Oh no, she's like, oh no, I'm gonna get spammed by all these people. They're happy. So Denise and Rebecca, we can put you through to them to like help. And until then, have fun with your gardens. Give it a try. This is the time, to get out there and try all kinds of things. So thank you so much for joining us today, and we will see you next time. Until then, let's go gardening. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.